Well, look, there's
Hello.
the Guelph office. Hello, hello.
Oh,
How's,
hey, Doug.
how's everything in Guelph this morning?
It's all right. We've got our snacks all set up. It's a nice sunny day here. Everything all good.
Beautiful. With no
Yeah.
smoke?
Well, no. Yeah, we're okay right now. But yesterday was kind of gloomy.
So how many days overall have you had that are quite smoky so far this summer, would you say? A couple of weeks worth or more?
It comes in waves too. Like some of the days were like the sky was yellow. But yeah, probably a couple weeks worth of yeah,
Yeah,
on and off stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
right.
Mhm. No fun. Scary times. Apocalyptic even. It looks like it. Yeah.
We are very lucky in Nanaimo, and there are so many nasty fires in BC, but um not around here. And since the prevailing winds are west to east, it
Yeah.
doesn't get blown this way. With very rare exceptions. We've had maybe 2 days this summer where you could just about smell a bit of smoke, but that was it.
But it's very lucky, yeah. Mhm.
Hmm. Ah.
You have any summer adventures coming up then? Anything fun that you're doing?
Sorry, anything fun?
Yeah, any fun summer adventures that you've been up to?
Well, we haven't had a lot of adventures. Went over to
Mhm.
Vancouver for a few days.
Okay.
We had our big trip in the spring over to the UK. So,
Mhm.
um, in October, I'll be going to Swift Current. What could be more exciting than that? And then a few days in New Orleans afterwards. So that'll be fun. But every day is
Yeah.
fun in Nanaimo.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. That's what it seems like. Yeah. Hi, Dave Pear.
Hey, Dave.
Hey,
How are you?
pretty good. How are you, Don?
Pretty good.
Are you going to teach us how to read?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
All
totally.
right.
It's just one
He
letter
sure
after
is.
another. Sound it out,
Just
Dave.
is that what chapter three is called? Just one letter after another. Like,
When Naomi was in grade one, that year they were in Calgary with me, and she was slow learning to read, and they weren't at that stage doing any phonics or hardly any in Calgary public schools. So I spent a lot of time sounding out words, and it sure helped. She could read by the end of I mean, very, very basic grade one books by the end of the year.
yeah, I found that odd. Like phonics had kind of circled back a little bit by the time our kids were there, but like it was still like it was not a it was not like a foregone conclusion that this is a good way to teach kids how to read. Like we were a big reading family when the kids were young, especially, and
Right?
I think Nico surprised everybody because she has like a very uncanny memory, and so she would memorize the books, and so she people thought she was reading when she was like 1.5, but she was not.
Wow.
She just knew all the words, but yeah, it's funny that.
Dave, do you think she could still remember now? You put one of the books in front of her that she used to read a lot when
Some
she was
for
in middle
sure, but definitely not all of it. But
school?
yeah, it serves her well. She does like to do plays with like local community groups, and she knows not only her lines but everybody else's as well.
Right. I was reading about an amazing kid the other day, George Forster, who went along on some of Captain Cook's voyages and did the botanical illustrations and illustrations of creatures and so on. And um, he was amazing in many ways. Not least of all, he taught himself several languages, including Greek. And at the age of 10, he was doing translations and presenting them to societies and so on. Um,
Wow.
Astonishing.
I wasn't doing that when I was 10.
Sorry,
I wasn't doing that when I was 10.
me neither. Oh,
But at 50,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh,
Just talking about whether any authors are actually good in their teens in the Calgary office. Not very many was the consensus. Mary Shelley.
Keats.
Was Keats writing in his teens? Okay. Didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Oh,
I
I
know it's
can't.
hard to.
Yeah.
Rambo, apparently, if you're into that kind of thing, was writing when he's a teenager.
When did Austen start?
Yeah, she was writing juvenilia. I think Lady Susan, she was under 20, but the novels, she was
Right.
in her 20s, early 30s. But yeah, she did start young.
There's Glenn with us. Welcome.
Everybody.
Hi, Glenn.
Welcome everyone else.
Mm,
Maybe we have everyone.
I think so. Yeah. Okay. Let's get the show on the road, guys. I hope everybody has their snacks and their NBIs and their smiley faces on. Yeah, so we're gonna get started with our English and composition list. Um, yeah, we're gonna add a little Babel recap for those of you that missed my little update. So that might be added into your agenda, but otherwise we're all good to go. So Laura, let's start with you. Some Babel compact.
Okay. Hi. Um, I realize that many of you have already been promoting these books, but since they haven't been presented at a sales conference yet and are extremely important to our list, we thought we should revisit the highlights now. So I'm going to try to keep this as brief as I can, since it's more of a reminder for, I think, the majority or all of you. Of course, a big challenge here is differentiating the compact A and B from the one volume compact and the concise A and B versions of the anthology. We recognize that this makes your jobs more difficult. We also strongly believe, and our research indicates, that these three configurations of the survey anthology really are serving three different markets, so it is worth the added difficulty and confusion. And we're doing what we can to help. We have a flyer that outlines the differences, and they're also summarized on the back inside cover of newly printed volumes. So you'll see that in the compact A and B books, and I think in the reprint of the concise and of the one volume. So when you're discussing these books in person, we think the main questions to ask if you're trying to figure out which version of the anthology to foreground is what date range does your survey cover and how streamlined an anthology are you looking for? So the one volume compact is best for a one semester survey that covers the medieval period to the present day. The compact A and B have exactly the same content as the one volume compact, just divided into two volumes. So instructors who are teaching either the first or the second half of the survey and want the shortest, least expensive version of the corresponding anthology should use the compact A or B. This is especially a good fit for shorter courses and courses at institutions where the students might not be able to handle longer or more extensive assigned readings. Meanwhile, the concise A and B are roughly twice as long as the compact A and B. And the concise is the best choice for instructors who assign a lot of reading, who want to vary their syllabi from year to year, or who feel strongly about having a wider range of choices or specific readings and authors they can teach from the bound book. It's just more comprehensive and features a greater diversity of authors and types of works. Other than the length and the degree to which they are streamlined, the major talking points for either form of the survey anthology are generally pretty similar. I'm going to outline them as I think we see them on the in-house team, but I'd also like you to check them against your sales experience and think about how what I'm about to say compares with the talking points you'd consider most effective, the ways that you like to approach the Babel survey anthology when you're doing sales. So first, breadth and variety. The Broadview includes unjustly neglected writers, Irish, Scottish, and Welsh writers, a balance of genres, and some interesting choices in our presentation of the more traditionally canonical authors. Of course, the Concise offers a wider range than the Compact, but I think even in the Compact, we've done a pretty good job of balancing those various competing needs. Second, historical and cultural context, including wonderful illustrations and omnibus sections on subjects like the crises of the 14th century, the abolition of slavery, modernism, and modernity. Again, the Compact has more, but the Concise has plenty. Third, thorough notes and reader-friendly introductions that are designed to meet the higher support needs of today's students without sacrificing accuracy or nuance. The approach to the apparatus is largely the same in both versions. Fourth, flexibility through the website component and packaging options. Because the Compact contains some longer works, but not as many as the Concise, it's very important, we think especially important for instructors to know that a standalone text can be packaged with the anthology at no charge. And also important for us to keep straight in-house that for Ball packaging, there is a small fee, but for Babel packaging, there is not for your first standalone text. For both the Compact and the Concise, Shakespeare is a particularly important author in this case. Instructors can choose from a number of Shakespeare plays on the website component, but there is no Shakespeare play in the print book. So if they want to teach Shakespeare in print, they will need to package one of our wide range of Shakespeare offerings with the anthology. And finally, price. The Compact is less expensive than the Norton Shorter. Right now, according to the prices on their website and Amazon, we are $11 cheaper in print, and permanent access to the Broadview ebook is a few cents cheaper than a Norton ebook rental. So that's, from the in-house perspective, variety, context, apparatus, flexibility, and price. And I would like to ask all of you, did I miss anything important? Do any of these actually not go over that well in practice? What do you like to prioritize?
I'll mention one thing, Laura. I think that was very comprehensive, very helpful. The cover design, I think very striking that you led the way in discussions and decisions on that. Yeah, it really, it actually related to that. If you're at a university where you know people are teaching British Lit Survey, particularly if you know they're using the Norton Shorter, and you can take along one of those volumes in your bag, I think pulling that out would have a big effect right there. I mean, again, as Laura said, to start with a question, what are they using and are they happy with it? Would they like something more substantial, or would they like something more concise? And it's only obviously if they want something more concise that you emphasize the Compact. But if they are looking for something more concise, they're saying their students have difficulty handling what they're giving them now, then pulling out a copy of the one of the two volumes of the Compact with the new covers, I think might have quite an impact. Um, but actually, let me ask, Laura was saying that this has been, people have been extensively promoting this already. My understanding was that hadn't happened that much. Christine, I know you sent a ton of emails, but have people in their in-person calling been promoting this? I thought we were going to postpone. It
In
came out in,
Yeah,
we
in
decided.
person, not really. But yeah, like I'm sure that extensive sales work has been on the email side, and there's been several rounds now of messages that have gone out about it,
We
and
have,
all towards the folks using the Norton Shorters.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I will
not
say we have done some in-person conversations about it because we had discussed maybe at a marketing meeting that we would feel awkward if we didn't raise it with folks because we wouldn't want them to then see it on the website and go, oh, is my rep only telling me about expensive books and not telling me about the less expensive books? We limited
Right.
our emails to only Norton users rather than looping in people who were already using the Concise in order not to undercut it. in person, there was some like, oh yeah, like as you say, Don, like how are you finding your books? Are your students looking for more variety? Are you trying to narrow in on a smaller selection of readings? And then having that as a oh, yeah, I use the concise, but it's way too long, so I'm thinking about something else than having a, oh, well, we do have this option if it's not working for you, the concise.
So how many people at this point have actually had that experience of an in-person call discussing the two-volume compact with an instructor?
I,
And how did it go, Tarini?
This was one conversation that happened like at MRU, and it was pretty brief. And it was from a Norton user who's used Norton for a very long time. So I think it'll be a multiple call situation.
Yeah.
But yes, I mentioned that it existed. This was before it was actually in print. And she was curious about the fact that we were making an even more compact version of an already concise anthology. So yes, I will talk to her about it again.
So in a case like that, would you carry a copy with you, knowing that background?
Yeah, especially for that specific professor. Like next time
Yeah.
I'm at MRU, I would definitely bring that copy
Yeah,
with me.
interesting.
Yeah. hmm
in my case, they were concise users, and it was sort of a like, yes, I'm using the concise again, and I asked how it was going, and we got into the yeah, I can assign fewer and fewer readings, etc. So I did mention it. I sent comps. In both cases, they decided to continue using the concise because they liked some of the readings that were in there that were not in the compact.
Right. Yeah.
Still using Broadview.
Yeah.
So of those three categories, because Norton users, obviously, we pitch it to every person who's a Norton user this fall and onward. People who aren't using books or are doing something else pitch it as well, but probably a lower likelihood. I'm still a little unclear on concise users. I guess the approach to ask them how it's going without preemptively mentioning the compact splits, and then see if they do gesture in the way that you point out, Christine, and not otherwise bring up the new compacts.
Go ahead, Brett.
I was just going to say, I don't mind that, but I would be really extremely wary of, like fishing for something. I wouldn't want it to appear in any way, shape, or form that I'm just waiting for their answer before I decide whether or not to mention the compact or not. Because I think that could be, I just feel a little dicey with that. I don't kind of like that thing or that the suggestion you're not, but the potential suggestion from their perspective that you're just not being completely forthcoming. So I'd be a little wary of doing that myself. I might kind of instead bring up, like, I know you're using the concise, you've had a good, go with that the last little bit. I did just want to mention also that we do have a new shorter version of the anthology. But if the concise is going really well for you, fantastic. We don't need to get into the details right now. So like something along those lines.
Especially now that both are in the catalog, I think, there's no sense in not mentioning it or having even the appearance of, oh, I'm only bringing this up in certain cases. Because you hand a new catalog over, professors are going to see it and then might wonder why you didn't mention it. I've had, one of the like, oh yeah, just so you know, this is coming. I mean, it was in the context of, yeah, my students are reading less, but I probably would have said that either way.
There is also the threat of confusion that I think we're doing everything we can to mitigate, but using those in-person opportunities to stave off confusion so that instructors who do want to stick with the concise don't get confused and order the wrong book that isn't what they want. I'm at least as concerned about that as I am about the possibility of undercutting our sales of the concise.
Yeah, I was going to mention that too, Laura. I'm glad you brought that up. Like, this was one thing that instructors across the board quite overwhelmingly raised as a problem. And we are doing everything that we can, and I think we've done a good job of it. But the fact remains, when we leave that office, I think there's going to be a great number of professors who will have heard concise and will have heard compact 30 seconds after that call. They will not know which one is which. They will not. So it's going to require, following up and keeping them straight and referring as well, hopefully to the inside front cover if they are getting copies. Or the flyer. We have a
Liaising,
flyer as well, do we not?
Yes, we do.
For this? Are we having flyers printed or no?
We do have flyers. I believe they're still going with every Babel comp that goes out.
Okay. Might be
For reps
worthwhile
alone?
taking 10, 15 or so out on a sales trip as well. So you can just leave that right in the office with the professor. That would be
They're
like,
also
there's the, oh, sorry.
they're also in the catalog. So there's a whole page in the catalog too.
Good.
So
Good.
if reps do want like individual, I can send you the digital copy of that flyer if you just want to print it in office, but also it's in the catalog too. So flagging that
Excellent.
page is probably helpful too.
Great. Thank you.
I think liaising with Lisa and Ross as well on something like this, just to try to make absolutely sure that there's no confusion with ISBNs or compact and size confusion, to carry it right through and check with them, if you know you have an adoption coming.
Right.
Laura, I was interested in what you said about price, that we are now $11 less expensive than the Norton Shorter. Is that per volume or is that total?
That is per volume.
Wow.
I was so stunned I checked 3 times, but I'm pretty sure that's correct.
In the US or in Canada or both?
The Norton website seems to be set up to only sell to American schools, so I'm assuming that price is in US dollars.
Yeah, Norton pricing in Canada is strange. We've looked before and it doesn't seem to be consistent from school to school. So
Right.
it seems to be subject to exchange rate fluctuations.
Yeah, they give a wholesale price to bookstores that is quite a bit lower. So I mean, obviously, so does seem like there's a lot of bookstore choice involved.
It sounds like there might be some point within the next year or so room to increase our prices on the two compact volumes. Very interesting.
Laura, can
Laura,
you quickly remind us of how much website aside, how much content there is in ours versus the Norton Shorter? I actually can't remember. Do we have more, less? Is it about the same?
That feels like something I should know off the top of my head, doesn't
Ah,
it? I'm not
don't worry about
sure.
it.
If you include the website material, I'd be astonished if we don't have more.
Oh, if
I
you
think
include
that
the
if we
website
include the
material,
website,
we
yes.
definitely have
Yeah.
more.
I think it's likely that we have more even without the website, given how much more content fits on a double column page. But no worries if you don't know the
Right.
answer.
I will know it momentarily. Is there no page count here?
It may be that the type of instructor who will be attracted to this won't care at all. In fact, we'll we'll prefer to be informed that we have less than the Norton if their students are having, so much trouble digesting what is assigned to them now.
That's true. Absolutely.
Um,
Okay, the page count, it's about 1,700 pages. I'm just looking at the shorter volume too. My guess is that is a little bit more content than what we have, even with the 2-column format, but not a lot more.
Yeah, probably comparable.
Yeah, it sounds like it wouldn't be at that ratio, wouldn't be dishonest to say it's about the same.
I agree. Yeah.
Somewhat less, but
Yeah,
not dramatically
yeah.
so. Yeah.
We can tackle that with the forthcoming Babel Super Compact Edition.
To be followed by
just a page.
the Matchbox edition.
You need like the old OED with a drawer on top that you take out the magnifying glass.
Oh yeah.
Laura, can I clarify? I don't know if I misunderstood, but did you say that there is, in comparison to the concise, even more like explanatory material for like in introductions and such, or is it the same, like exact same?
Oh,
Just
thank you for clarifying. Definitely want to be clear about that. It is basically exactly the same. I mean,
Okay.
we made a few revisions in working on the compact, but it's the same introductory
Okay.
material.
Okay. Cool.
If an author has a two-page introduction in the concise, they'll have a two-page introduction in the compact. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, questions, clarifications? All right, that is it from me.
Thank you, Laura. Marjorie, we're going to talk about Canadian literatures in English. On to you.
Yeah, I'm actually talking about the Canadian Literatures in English, an introduction. So this a historical introduction. So this is pretty straightforward to describe. The authors were really hopeful that they could pull the section introductions out of the anthologies and make them into a slim standalone book. We agreed that we would do that. So we will, of course, proofread everything to remove references to the anthology. But this will be a collection of the historical slash cultural slash literary introductions to each section of Canadian literatures in English, 1 and 2. So this book will not be split. It will cover the entire span of Anglophone literature in Canada, from the beginnings to basically the present day. The last introduction comes up right through the COVID-19 pandemic, talks about elbows up. Very up to date as of this time. Yeah, these introductions are quite concise. The book's only going to be about 150 pages to cover the whole span, but very thorough, very focused on broad historical and cultural movements. It talks about the COVID-19 pandemic, the conflicts with Trump over trade and other issues, the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter. These are all in the most recent introduction, but each introduction talks about sort of broad historical and cultural events. They're very straightforward, very readable. There are a lot of references to specific literary works, and we'll retain those without the, see later in the anthology. So it's a really great, concise, up-to-date resource for someone who wants to learn about the history of Canadian literatures in English. As far as the market, excuse me, I think there are essentially two courses that don't, Canadian literature courses that don't use an anthology at all. There are a decent number of these that use novels, standalone works, short genre collections rather than a comprehensive literature anthology, and might want to have this kind of introductory material that is absent from those anthologies. So that would be one option. Another option, I think, is just going to be trade essentially. The authors both said this would be great for PhD students doing their exam prep, interested scholars, researchers. That's not something we can really do as sales reps, but I think realistically, this book will be bought a fair bit by people who just want to have a copy. Yeah, so pretty straightforward, I would say. Probably no point in discussing it with anyone that is already using the Brown and Bennett anthology or the Sugars and Moss anthology. The materials there, the Brown and Bennett has much less comprehensive introductions, but it does have general introduction. So I think this is going to be for courses that don't use an anthology at all. Yeah, and I would not comp it willy-nilly unless it actually seems like something someone would use for a course, because some people just might want to get their hands on it as a resource.
Marjorie, it didn't come up very often last term, but there were a couple of Americans who asked to see the anthology, and we couldn't send it to them. Would this be available in the US?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
no permissions, no rights restrictions. Yeah,
Okay,
good
I
point,
didn't think
Dave.
so.
The anthology is Canada only. This would be worldwide. No reason that we couldn't sell it everywhere. Yeah, that's another market that I hadn't thought of. Tiny market, but Canadian literature
It
courses in
it's
the
a
US.
it's a very small market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't do this often, Marjorie, because we don't have many books that have any appeal to a trade or library market. But in this case, would we, for example, send an advance review copy to Quill and Quire, do some of the things that people do routinely with trade books?
We certainly can. We can discuss that at the promo meeting. I think we did not have much luck. We did send copies of the first volume to some trade outlets and did not get any bites. But possibly this would be something that would be more of interest to general readers.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
And
can,
libraries, I would think if we can reach them, but yeah, something
and
like that.
libraries, but that's, yeah, a
Yeah.
challenging
Yeah.
task. But yeah, we can discuss that at the promo meeting. Any other questions? Over to you, Don, for science fiction.
One thing, still
Sure.
on that book, or that I'm reminded of, that uh, some reps who haven't been with Broadview for that many years might not be aware of is that we have something very similar for British literature,
Mm.
2 volumes that they've never done particularly well, but they both sell 100 or 200 copies a year, year after year. British Literature, a historical overview, 2 volumes each, yeah, 150, 160 pages, something like that. Nicely produced. So again, if you have for British literature somebody who says, I never use an anthology, you can always follow up with a question. Would something like this be useful, as background for the students, a brief historical overview? Same sort of idea.
That one is
Uh,
2 volumes, right, Don? Not
that's
one.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Matching the usual survey split in BritLit. Um, yeah, it's interesting that Canadian Lit, it's just all over the map in terms of whether they even have a traditional survey. Is it split? Is it one? Is it all theme courses? There doesn't seem to be um, any
And the
norm these
split
days.
falls in different places for different
Yeah,
courses. Yeah, it is tricky.
yeah. But sci-fi courses, I think it's true to say, tend to focus primarily on science fiction in the 20th and 21st centuries. Um, but some instructors, I have no idea how many. Certainly, some instructors um, like to spend at least a bit of time on the origins of sci-fi. How far back does it go? And there's no clear agreement. Some people say, cite works 100 or 200 years ago as the first sci-fi. Other people go back to um, the 1500s, the 1600s, and for the first supposed works of sci-fi. But if you're going to look at the origins at all, and also some instructors like to spend some time discussing um, how to define science fiction and where the borders are, and exploring the borders of science fiction is what this little website is all about. Um, where do you draw a line not only in the origin of science fiction, but in genre between utopian fiction and science fiction, dystopian fiction and science fiction, speculative fiction and science fiction, and so on. Um, and I guess as well, and this is where the website ends in terms of um, the future. What is the future of science fiction in the age of AI? So the borders in that direction too. If the instructor is using an anthology, there may well be a fair amount of material on these sorts of topics within the anthology. Certainly, Jason Haslam's wonderful recent sci-fi anthology from Broadview includes some material of this sort. Um, but again, I think it's true to say that most science fiction courses um, do not use anthologies. They use, a handful of individual science fiction works. In which case, there won't be any course text coverage of the origins of sci-fi or the borders of sci-fi in this way. So that's where this little website can help. It's compact um, because it aims to provide really only one component of a course. Um, it's readable, whether they're complete pieces or for excerpts from longer works. The selections for the website are all short. Um, each selection comes with a brief but informative headnote to fill in the background, and each selection is annotated. Credit to Emmett, incidentally, here for a lot of good work on the editorial and textual side. Um, yeah, each selection is annotated very helpfully, so everything should be quite accessible to undergraduates at any level. And finally, of course, it's very inexpensive. 6.95. So it's a very small thing for a professor to say, sure, I'll throw that onto the course. And I don't spend much time on that sort of thing, but students may find it interesting. And for the one or two lectures to touch on that sort of thing, it could be really helpful. Um, yeah, I don't know what more to say, really. It's not something to emphasize a great deal, not least of all because the revenue to ProView with that low price will be rather small. But yeah, yeah, I assume science fiction is a call you would almost always make and ask about the Haslam anthology. But if they're not using anthologies, we have so many, from Frankenstein to H.G. Wells. You have your books by course list. How many are there? Probably at least 10 or 12 BEs that can be classified, going back to the Man on the Moon, classified as science fiction. So yeah, if you're making that call to throw in a mention of this um, new little thing that can be a nice add-on for a sci-fi course. Um, any questions, comments, thoughts? It's gone very quiet.
I'm just really curious about the inclusion of an AI story in here. Um, was that you that put in the prompt to make that story, or?
Yes, it was. And Yeah, it's a fun way to end it. AI really is amazing. I mean, it's amazing in many appalling ways, but wow, what it can do in 2 seconds, or maybe it was 8 seconds before, um, from a very brief prompt, out came this story, and it's not a terrible story. It's not the world's best sci-fi story. It's, I would call it mediocre, but um, Tarina, you're smiling. Yeah, you read it, eh?
Yeah, I'm
No, I haven't. I
so
haven't. Oh,
so
But
Serena.
bizarre, very creepy. But yeah, it's definitely worth the read. It's a short story.
On to Guide to Writing.
Let's do it.
Okay. Um, I hope everybody is familiar with the seventh Canadian edition of the Broadview Guide to Writing, which has now been around for several years. And as with that one, as with previous editions, arguably the biggest thing to emphasize with the Broadview Guide to Writing is readability. And again and again, um, to mention when you can the Gerald Graff and Kathy Berkenstein quote, um, smart, helpful, and even fun to read, which is obviously not true of most writing guides or handbooks. Um, Actually, that's probably the biggest thing in terms of how to approach this for in-person sales. Um, don't say anything significant about this book unless you've ascertained that the person does want to use a writing guide or handbook. And it used to be that almost everyone teaching intro composition would use some sort of writing guide or handbook, and now I don't know what it's down to, probably 10% or less of people teaching these courses who use a handbook. That's still, because the market's so large, that's still a large absolute number, but it's yeah, to say at the outset. So how do you work the course um, for course materials? Do you use a writing guide or a handbook? Um, and if obviously if they say no, I never use a handbook, well then you move on to our many other composition offerings. So only if they say, I used to, then I gave it up, and then I'm thinking of going back to it. I think maybe the students need some sort of reference guide that they can hold on to. And um, um, seventh edition, what's different? It's more concise. Um, Corey Frost spent a good deal of time going through the entire book with that in mind, with the goal of making it um, more concise than previous editions at the sentence by sentence level, as well as cutting out chunks of material in the usage section, for example, or um, um, yeah, so more concise than previous editions, but still, um, this is a very comprehensive guide. It's not a it's more substantial by quite a bit than, for example, the Little Seagull Reader, which is um, I think by far the most popular of the concise handbooks. Um, the emphasis, as before, is on academic writing, but new to this edition, as with the seventh Canadian edition, there is solid coverage of informal and personal writing as well. That had been something prior to the seventh edition that was a notable omission. Um, Other new things in terms of content, two chapters that are entirely new and that aren't in the seventh Canadian either. Um, One is on AI. Uh, a good deal of effort was put into that chapter in terms of trying to make it as comprehensive as would be reasonable for a book of this sort, but also trying to strike the right balance because it remains so controversial among English instructors, and um, a lot of emphasis has to be put on not encouraging the use of AI, but also, given that students are going to use it, how um, realistically it's something people are going to be aware of. How do you deal with all that in writing in um, the late 2020s? I think that's a good chapter. There's also a new chapter on reading. That was the origin for the um, book I'll talk about in a moment. I imagine just about everybody on this call is aware that there's been, in the last few years, a lot of discussion about students' interest in reading, but also ability to read. Their ability to read seems to have been eroded. Certainly, many instructors have reported that whereas 10 or 15 years ago they could assign 7 or 8 or 10 books for a course and students would read most of them, those same instructors nowadays are saying it's a struggle if I assign 2 books or 3 books for the same course, and similar things. And this goes for all sorts of reading, um, for literary reading, for novels, but also for long essays, um, for reading textbook materials of all sorts. It's a huge issue. Um, and it was when I started to feel in trying to draft that reading chapter that there's so much here that could be said that the idea came up of a separate short book. Um, what else is new? The redesign. Credit to Marjorie on this one, and also to is it Liz who did the redesign,
It
Marjorie?
is Liz, yeah.
Um, just a great job, I think. I think you'll be very impressed when you see it. I don't think the old design was bad, but it's maybe a little clunky, a little old-fashioned. And the new one is much more pizzazzy. Um, um, yeah, so we hope that will help as well.
And you mean
Um,
in the inside of the book, Don? Like it's not
oh
just the
yeah,
cover. Like it's
yeah,
okay.
throughout. Yeah,
Cool.
it's how would you describe
Cool.
it, Marjorie?
We could send people a sample, just say it's uncorrected. Like it looks so nice. I can't overstate. It looks just, Liz is a really good designer. I think it's the best looking book like this on the market. It's going to be full color, so that really changes the game as far as how features appear. And it's just really attractive. All the little boxes are very well integrated into the page. I think it just makes for a way more pleasurable reading experience as well as a pretty book. But yeah, let me pull out a little design sample just so people can see because it is something that you kind of have to see.
I think the
Is
design
it
really
quill
helps it
bound
make it.
too?
No,
Sorry, Brett.
Oh, I was just going to say the new design makes it much more navigable, I think, as well.
exactly. Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
a key element of it.
Yeah, it's very easy to see. Like the current one has the the tabs on sort of on the pages. So as you flip, you can see, but having each section color coded makes it really easy to get where you're going. Stephen, it's just going to be perfect bound, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah, just standard binding. So spiral binding is extremely expensive now. And Thomson, the printer we generally use for high production value books, doesn't do the Odabind that we did, which is like a normal looking spine that falls open easily. So yeah, kind of unfortunate. Hopefully it doesn't hurt the market too much. There are other perfect bound books in this market, but they usually do something to make them lie open a little more easily.
There is a with the seventh edition, as with previous editions, there's a fairly comprehensive website that goes along with this, with um, a lot of exercises, and that there's not a lot of change in that, but where the book has been reorganized or the numbering has been changed, of course, that will happen on the website as well. That's being addressed now. Um, the distinctive thing about the exercises is that when students do them, you're not just, with many of them, most of them, not all of them, you're not just told what the correct answer is. There's also an explanation that comes up as to why the correct answer is correct. So um, um, it's much more helpful than the exercises provided for many other writing guides or handbooks.
Dawn, did you want to say something maybe a little bit about the market for this book? Like, obviously, if you're talking to someone that uses a handbook, you're going to talk about this handbook. That's clear and obvious, I hope, for everybody. But in a general sense, like what kind of class or instructor or institution this particular handbook might be a best fit for?
Yeah, I think it's um the upper end of the market probably more than the lower end. Certainly, I don't think um we've had many adoptions in the past at two-year colleges or community colleges of any sort. We've had some of the Canadian edition, certainly, but um adoptions have tended more towards yeah, institutions in the middle of the spectrum or towards the higher end. Um, places like Wilfrid Laurier University, they've used a ton of copies over the years. Where has it been used in the US? I'm actually not sure. But certainly the level at which the book is pitched is um, more appropriate for a mid-level state university or above than it is um, for a lower level institution.
I think the US edition was briefly used in large numbers at a couple of, I would say, lower level institutions, but those adoptions were fleeting. And since then, it's been kind of a mixed bag, a pretty modest total market. But I'll take a look at where it's actually been adopted.
I'll be very interested to hear after so many years of decline in the percentage of writing instructors who use a handbook or writing guide, if there is any plateauing or reversal of that trend um, that's noticeable now.
I did as well just want to kind of go back to that Graf and Birkenstein quote, the even fun to read. So I think most people that are most professors that are searching for a writing guide think of writing guide, think of handbooks as reference books. They're things that their students will consult. And while that's true, and the Bravia Guide does accomplish that, when you go back and focus on that Graf and Birkenstein quote, the even fun to read, the one thing that we wrote in the descriptive copy is that, yeah, this is not just a book that students will turn to consult, but that they will, we hope, turn to in order to read. Like this, there is more, simply, there's more stuff to this book. There's more nuance, there's more debate, There's more description, and there will be some instructors that's not their thing. They just want the bare bones reference. That's fine. We also have those books. But for this particular handbook, it is, I think, a book that you'd want to talk to professors, emphasizing the engagement, the potential for engagement that is there for students, rather than just that kind of stuff that is a quick Google search away from finding. That's in there, but there's way, way more.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point to make, and whole sections like the how to be good with words, I think you can read right through and just find them interesting. Um, so it definitely can function as a reference guide in the standard way, but standard way, but fully updated. So you'll find entries on relatable and diverse, and so on, as well as on subject verb agreement and infer and imply and um, dangling modifiers. I think we get the grammar, in fact, um, not only right, but right in with all the nuances dealt with, better than a hacker's reference or the everyday writer, or than certainly than the Little Seagull Handbook. I would say than any other handbook or writing guide that I'm aware of. But yeah, just as Brett says, it's not just for reference or for working on those specific things. It can also be read for pleasure. Anything else?
To clarify, the most recent Canadian editions, like both the Pocket Guide and the larger handbook, they're still in the old formatting version of the book. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Could we still pitch this version if like arguably we're in a situation where like maybe a professor does want a
Yeah.
more nicely laid out? Yes. Okay. Cool.
I think we typically had that happen not infrequently when a new American edition came out, and the Canadian edition was 3 or more
Hmm.
years old, that some people in Canada would want to use the American edition because it was newer and in some ways more attractive. And
Yeah.
there's no obstacle to that I'm aware of. We've
Nope,
certainly done it in the past. Yeah,
no. We got Canadian and US rights for the very few permissions. Pretty
great.
sure. I'll double check with Jacqueline, but I'm sure that's the case. Yeah, I think that's actually decently likely. There's nothing in the branding, of course, that says
Yeah.
American. So some instances of spelling would be the only thing that a Canadian instructor might find objectionable.
Yeah.
Cool.
And certainly the inclusion of new chapters on things like AI and reading would make it attractive. Yeah.
Apologies if I missed this earlier. The Canadian Guide to Writing sells in far greater numbers presently in its pocket version. Do we have a pocket version of this one planned? What's our response if people ask us, do you have the shorter version?
We have not really discussed this.
Okay.
We probably should.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, but yeah.
Yeah, but it would
Um,
not be imminent. Like it would probably be fall 2027 at the earliest.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah, good question. It is something we should do. And it won't be nearly as labor intensive as this one, which was a ton of work, but it would still be quite a bit of work for Don and Corey to cut it down. So,
the, doing the pocket editions of this book is one of the very, very few things I can think of where it has sometimes taken less time than you imagine it might take beforehand. So I think you're right, Marjorie, that not before a year from now is likely, but yeah, we should be able to do it pretty quickly.
great.
Um, How to Read is, we were saying, is an expansion. Well, it developed out of the work of doing um, a chapter on this topic for the Broadview Guide. Um, I don't know how many of you have come across Rose Horowitz's articles in The Atlantic. There was one that's worth looking up from 2024. called The Elite College Students Who Can't Read Books. Um, and it was a real eye-opener for me. More recently, Horowitz has done an article on reading more generally, not just for students, but for people of all ages, and um, how much difficulty people are having in the digital age when they're used to scrolling and reading very small tidbits to find within themselves the ability to concentrate for long periods, to comprehend and to focus in ways that will help them to understand long essays, long novels, anything extended, anything substantial. Um, um, the the first Horwich article mentions Nicholas Dames at Columbia, um, who teaches 19th century literature in particular, and how um, 2 or 3 years ago he was thinking, this is so weird. These are students at Columbia, they're top students, and many of them are saying that they can't deal with the reading and um, what's happening here. And it started to become clear to him how and why this might have happened when he asked one student about it, and she said, well, in high school, we were never asked to read a full book. When they dealt with works of fiction in high school, entirely through excerpts. Not uncommon these days. So part of it is just habit that, this is stuff that people haven't done before. Um, but there are a lot of things, a lot of causes working together um, that have led to a decline in people's interest in reading, but also at some level, ability to read. Um, and um, amazingly, there are basically no books out there that are designed to address this problem. The leading book on how to read a book um, still is Mortimer Adler's How to Read a Book that was first published in the early 1940s. It was revised in the 1970s, and astonishingly, it still sells. It's a lot. This is addressed in the preface to the book, how different it is from this, as well as, of course, being completely outdated. There's nothing at all that talks about the difficulties people um, have in reading in the digital age, and how to change that for those who want to, how to develop reading skills for those who have not developed them by the time they get to university or at any stage in life. Certainly, it's a problem that can exist for people at any age. Um, I imagine that there will be quite a few books coming along. I don't know this, but I'd be surprised if there aren't, given the amount of publicity there has been, and also given the extent to which this is being discussed as a matter of pedagogy by people at leading institutions. I was in touch with Nicholas Dames, who I used to call in at Columbia, and mentioned this book. And he happens to be, fortuitously, the director or chair of the committee for the core curriculum at Columbia, which is several thousand students, and he was quite interested with a view to those courses. So we're um, sending, I think, 10 copies to him for his committee. Um, Amanda Claybaugh, who's the Dean of Undergraduate Education at Harvard, and of course on our board of directors, on leave for many years. Um, I mentioned it to her, and we're sending multiple copies to her as well. She was quite interested. Um, I happened to be in touch a week or so ago with someone at Texas Christian University over a George Lepard excerpt question that she'd posted on C19. Um, and we were in touch, exchanging emails about that. And then I Googled her and realized that she was head of the core curriculum committee at Texas Christian. Um, and she also was interested and said this is being widely discussed. And I think 10 copies are winging their way to her as well, for her and her colleagues. this is not something that is, I don't think, widely reflected in the structure of courses yet. There are some. Corey Frost mentioned that at his new institution in New Jersey, there's a new course, one semester course on reading that prefaces the two semesters of courses on writing. Um, I know there are some other institutions that have that. My suspicion is not many, and some of you may have knowledge of that I don't. Um, but I would be very surprised if there's not more of that happening in the future, as well as uh, people teaching writing courses, as they always have, and some of them have paid some attention to reading. There are chapters on reading in many writing books. So how does this book differ from what they can find in those chapters on reading? Um, More material is, of course, it's a short book, but it is a full book of over 200 pages, as versus a chapter of 20 pages. But also a difference in approach. When you look at the chapters on reading in most writing textbooks, they deal primarily in generalizations. They will, again and again, they will say, be an active reader, um, which is a pretty vacuous thing to recommend if you're not giving a lot of good examples, and they don't. Um, How to Read, on the other hand, this book is filled with examples. It's light on generalizations and it's very heavy on examples that will actually show people how to pick up on cues, how to draw inferences from what they're reading, and so on. Um, it also has, and in the afterword or postscript, I guess it is, it deals directly with um, the hoary old advice to be an active reader, not a passive reader, and how inadequate that is. Um, what else can I say? It's designed to be flexible. It's short, so where but it's still a small book of substance where there is a one semester course on reading or reading critically. It could certainly serve as the main book for that course, but it's short enough that if it's an instructor who's thinking of a 1 or 2 week component of a 13-week course on writing devoted to reading, it could be ordered as a supplementary book to cover that week or two on reading. Um, it's the full package. It comes with a companion website, um, uh, and an instructor's guide, which will be posted soon. It's not, I don't think it's up there quite yet, but it will be very soon. The companion website with um, additional materials and the one chapter on visual material, which is quite long and of course includes a lot of color illustration. That entire chapter is online for those who, if they're doing reading, also want to talk about quote unquote reading visual material. That's fairly common, but um, I should probably mention the AI chapter as well. The manuscript of this book was sent out to a number of reviewers, I think 9 or 10 in all. One or two of them said that they didn't want to see anything on AI in the book. Um, that if we were going to include anything on AI, we should put it on the companion website. Um, Decided against that simply because it is becoming so important a consideration in so many ways. But like the reading chapter in The Broad View Guide to Writing, it's a very balanced approach and it emphasizes cautionary notes, I would say more than anything. Yes, AI can sometimes help with reading, um, but be very, very careful and yeah, basically do not rely on it. Um, um, how to sell this book? Carry a copy with you. I would say is the main thing. It's small, it's light. If you ask, you can ask almost any professor. Are you are your students finding that they're having more trouble reading these days than in the past? Students you had in the past, and 99% of instructors will say, well, yeah, in fact, they are. And that's when you can pull out this little book and, well, this is a very different little book that we think can help. Shall we send you an e-copy or indeed a physical copy? Um, it's the market, I don't know. I thought of it originally as almost entirely for writing courses. But there are a lot of literature examples, and several of the reviewers were people who teach mainly literature courses, and they thought that a book like this could be useful for those courses as well. So I'll be interested to see how sales break down, whether there are more in composition and writing or more in literature. And there are other examples of academic writing and so on too. So there may be um, examples in different disciplines.
It's one thing I was going to mention, like the percentage of reviewers, I can't recall, but I think as high as three-quarters of them were actually like English folks doing intro literature. And that was the context in which a lot of the reviews came back. There were people in comp that were very, very interested. But I do think that's something that's going to be really key to keep in mind, that this is not just your, a standard book to talk about when you are talking to intro comp folks, but intro lit across the board. This is 100% US and Canada, the book to mention. Like maybe the first one for this term anyway. It's really key there. Another thing you had mentioned there, Don, like the chapters that a lot of comp books have on reading, and most of them do nowadays. But this book I think would be particularly useful for any courses that have that, like whether it's comp or English, like intro critical reading and write, like reading and writing, like anything with reading and writing in the course title is clearly going to foreground for you the attention that's paid to reading. And it's probably going to be more than just a chapter's worth of coverage. So this would be a book. Bang on. And those courses are becoming a little bit more common in both comp and English.
Yeah.
I agree. Just we're at time pretty much, but just a couple of very quick notes. Just when we did do that initial reviewing, and the other feedback we've received on the book has been really, really positive. Like I just want to emphasize that like people who've seen it are really excited about this book. So I think that's really encouraging. I think with regard to the comp slash literature humanities, I think there is a weird divide there that can be sort of unhealthy sometimes, where comp people are like, nah, there's literature in this, or vice versa. I think you may encounter that sometimes. And I will say, Don talks about the chapters. I think his characterization of the sort of brief chapters on reading in many comp books is accurate. In developmental comp, there are more books that are literally about how to read and do go into a lot more detail and specificity. They are for a very different, much more basic market, and their tone and approach is very different. This is not the same kind of book, but someone teaching developmental comp or intro comp may bristle at the suggestion that there aren't books out there. Just kind of a note when you're talking to
Yes.
people.
Fair point. Yeah,
Yeah.
I should have made that clear that they're not how to read books of this sort. There are at the developmental level, right?
Yeah.
Another market, just to mention briefly, I mentioned the core curriculum at Columbia and so on. Any interdisciplinary course, liberal studies, great books, core curriculum, um, where they ask people to read John Stuart Mill and Hobbes and Virginia Woolf and so on. Um, um, that's also potentially quite a large market for this book.
I know you said we were at time, and I don't want to get too into the weeds here, Don. But with the AI chapter, you said it's very balanced. You said that it emphasizes caution. Could you just give me like an example of something that you do think it could be used for to help, just in case a prof asks about that?
Yeah. Um, there's a um, there's a paragraph from a Samuel Johnson essay used as an example. It's the most difficult paragraph in what probably is not a very easy essay. Um, but it is the sort of writing, 18th century in this case, that a lot of students, no matter how much they try, are just going to be throwing up their hands and saying, I cannot understand this. And um, very cautiously, this book, suggests that it's not a bad thing for a student to take that paragraph and um, uh, run it through AI because, but with prompts, and this is another thing too, that it tells the student, um, you can refine your instructions so that you can say, I'm having difficulty with this Samuel Johnson paragraph. Um, can you please give me a version that's more accessible or more easily understood for 21st century readers? But please keep as closely as possible to the original style. And it's very interesting if you try this sort of thing yourself. Um, it's not bad. AI is not bad at doing that. It's no, it's not as good as if the student can struggle with the difficult reading themselves. Um, but if essentially the choice is between no matter how much they struggle, they get nothing out of this. And if they run the difficult paragraph through AI, they do understand it and they do get something of Samuel Johnson's style. Um, Not the full original, no, it is in a sense, a translation, but just as when in those great books courses, they teach um, Plato and Kant and so on, they use translation. So, you are getting something with a translation. It's not the best, but that may give you some sense.
Thanks.
Onward and upward, next book.
We take a quick break.
Yeah, I was thinking we take a little break. We could do like 10 minutes and see everybody back in a bit. Okay, let's do it.
Perfect timing. I know. Because I was hearing you talking about reading. And there she is. Yeah, that was good.
Well, you're muted there, Don.
There we go. Unmuted.
Like a little breakout meeting. I'm just going to be presenting these books to you, just in case you wanted to get back on the road and sell some things.
Oh, I'd so love to. I booked myself after SwiftCurrent in October, 4 days in New Orleans.
Oh, nice.
Which,
Nice.
yeah, with no sales whatsoever. But
Was it?
gosh, at least an afternoon, I should be doing some sales down there.
I agree. You should have just like an afternoon for a U-Haul rental wouldn't have been much at all.
Yeah, straightforward. Um, so how much did you get on the road, Archie, when you were based in the US there as an independent contractor or whatever the heck you were?
Actually, I probably got on the road more than
Oh,
when I mean, I'm right there, so I just used my personal vehicle and, you know, uh, drove through Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. It was, no flights to arrange, so just a
right.
matter of driving around in the vehicle. So
Yeah,
yeah, as much or more time on the road doing sales
right.
than I normally do.
So how did you get that great Zula um, uh, college uh, college
Yeah,
adoption or
yeah. It was I something of a manner of some campus detective work because the Zula website isn't super informative. So
right.
I asked the right person about who the ex-core director was and then went and found them. And thankfully they were in because their website online doesn't say that that's who they are. It just says she's a
Oh,
member of the psychology department.
wow. Did, has anybody got an update from Ross or are the books um, on their way finally over the border or
I think so.
because
Yeah,
they
they're
came back? Did you hear about all that stuff, Archie? How they came back to us?
hmm
Right.
Yeah, and yeah, Dave, sorry if you wanted to. Dave
Go
probably
right
has a
ahead,
better
Archie.
sense.
Go right ahead.
Oh, yeah, yeah. It sounds like they're clearing customs now and are on track
Great.
to
Fine.
get where they're going.
Great. I had just
Welcome
a
back.
couple of, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, no, go for it, Don.
I just had a couple of follow-ups on the how to read stuff. One is that I'm not sure why this is there. I don't think it's usually there on new book information sheets, but the nationality um, of the three authors is listed on the NBI. Could we take that off, Dylan? Given that the largest market for this book is in the US, I would love it not to be foregrounded that all three authors are Canadian. Corey's been teaching in the US, of course, for decades now. I just think not having the
I don't,
nationality would be great.
The
I
info
don't
there
think
isn't
it's just,
circulated in the metadata, Don. It's just for internal use,
yeah.
the authorship nationality. So that's always removed. It's just for this
Okay.
conversation.
Mhm.
So don't people ever hand an NBI to a prof or maybe
Mhm.
not? Not
No,
anymore. Okay,
never
great.
heard of.
Okay, lovely. The other thing, that was it. Well, we were talking before Maureen went out and got the mail, and here's our copy of the latest issue of The Atlantic with Rose Horowitz's new article. Um, I was in touch with her incidentally, and she's asked for a copy too. So a copy is, I trust, winging out its way to her. Hey, does anyone? I asked Ross, but he hasn't gotten back yet. I'm sure he's incredibly busy. Have all the comps gone out on that? Does anyone know?
I was just looking in High Point, and a very large number of comps have gone out, and I could see a bunch of the ones you mentioned, Don. I haven't combed through to check for every single
Right.
one,
Yeah.
but definitely up until Ross had a back injury, so he's temporarily away from the warehouse. But it
Oh,
did look like up until very recently, all the comps had gone out. You could always check with Lisa too.
Yeah.
Dawn, she'll have access to the records if
Yeah,
you want to check
okay.
on something specific.
How is he? Is it serious?
I think he's fine. No, I think he just needed to get some painkillers and rest a bit. Yeah.
Oh, poor Ross.
Yeah.
I did want to bring up a question actually, just about that comp kind of number target. I don't think any special sales has started for this yet. Well, I know it hasn't because I prepared the report myself. But I think we're going to blow past that number in no time. And I just wanted to make sure that that's good with the editors. I think just like the friends list messages have gone out. That's it so far. And I think we're already over 100.
Yeah, it's a delicate situation, isn't it? Because this is such a generic book that's so applicable in so many different ways that I think a lot of instructors are going to be, oh, heck yeah, I'd love to see a copy of that. But the likelihood of their using it in a class is obviously a lot more, yeah, I don't know.
Up in the air.
Yeah, so it might be good. It might be good to kind of foreground at least in SSPs to send digital copy as a first option. What do
Yeah.
people
Even
think
with
about
that though, like we're
Yeah.
still going to blow
They're gonna
way
blow?
past
Yeah.
this. Like, oh yeah.
It seems to me okay if we blow past it in the right way. Like if we are offering electronic copy first only to everybody, um, um, and being careful in that way. If somebody says, "Oh boy, that's a topic that really interests me," let me send you an e-copy, but not saying right off the bat, "Let me send you a bound book." On the other, but in the other direction, if somebody's a director of composition or a director of a core curriculum,
Yeah, I have
send
no
them 10
problem there.
copies. If they're willing to take one for every committee member, send them 10.
Yeah. No, I do agree with that.
Yeah. I think, Dave, that estimate was just unrealistic, clearly. So let's keep an eye on it, but
Yeah.
I think we just inevitably are going to blow past it by
And maybe we can
quite a
just
bit.
discuss this at the next marketing meeting when we have numbers that are more firm.
Sounds good. Yeah,
Okay.
it's
Yep.
not it wasn't a terribly expensive book to produce, so its printing cost wasn't terribly high. So as far as the cost to Broadview, but shipping, all these things add up.
Yeah. I think of it similarly to the Dobrin book. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who are going to want to look at it to see if it might inform their teaching as
yeah.
much as
Yeah.
they'd like to use it in their teaching. But that's not necessarily a bad reason to be in touch and everything. Okay, thanks. We can do that.
Great.
Should we move on to analyzing sentences? Is that good with everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to just throw up a PowerPoint for both of these books. So my apologies. I'm going to be looking at my other screen, and my other screen is right there, but I am also paying attention to the folks on the line, but it won't look like I am. But let's just start. Let's hope this works. Are you seeing analyzing sentences?
Yes.
Love it. Okay, so that's the first one that we're going to be discussing. I'm going to try to step away from the NBIs a little bit for both books. I kind of like to do that. You have the NBIs in front of you. You have that information. And I like to try to present the books in a little bit more of a different way, just so that you're digesting the information in a little bit of a different way. But for both books, we'll start here with analyzing sentences. This is not a difficult market to identify. This is a book that is destined for grammar classes. And in an even narrower sense, it's a book destined for grammar classes that look very closely, specifically at sentence diagramming. There are not a lot of books on the market that do this, to the exclusion of other approaches within the covers of the books. We have the two main ones. Cindy Vito's Grammar by Diagram is the other. Those are the two key books that look at sentence diagramming completely. So I think what I wanted to do with this presentation for this book is really couch information about analyzing sentences within the context of the veto as well, so that you folks will know how to distinguish between the two when you encounter someone that's interested. So what is it exactly? It is a grammar text, slightly more advanced than the veto, I would say, that teaches sentence analysis using Reed-Kellogg diagramming. Reed-Kellogg diagramming really, really quickly is just taking a sentence and diagramming the different grammatical portions of that sentence in ways that isolate those parts of speech so that you can see how they kind of act within a sentence, how they're positioned, how they are pictured within a sentence. Reed-Kellogg diagramming goes back to like the 1860s or 70s, I think, and it was quite common at the time, and it fell out of favor a little bit, but there are still some traditionalists today that really appreciate this method as a way of teaching grammar. The diagramming in the Arch book is presented as a method of supporting analytical thinking. It's not just a means to understand grammar. It's not just a means to understand what different parts of speech are, what they do in a sentence. It's looking at those parts of speech, analyzing them as a means to make more deliberate choices about style in your own writing. So yes, it does teach grammar, but it teaches it with an eye toward analyzing sentences rather than just learning the little parts of speech within grammar. And I will note it. Oh, yeah, just one quick note there. When you think about the Arch book, the forthcoming Arch book as a book for analyzing sentences, it's interesting to note the subtitle for the veto book, which is Understanding Grammar through Traditional Science, through Traditional Sentence Diagramming. And yeah, you're understanding grammar in this context too, but you're making that step forward into analyzing the analysis of sentences. So yes, students have learned how sentences work grammatically so that they can better understand how writers create meaning and effect. So we're moving from grammar into the syntax, the order of the words within a sentence. And that begs then as well an analysis of style, or leads into an analysis of style. And Arch talks about style not just as polish or correctness. She talks about it in the context of rhetorical choices and effects. A writer applies stylistic decisions for very specific reasons of persuasion, rhetorical effect, what have you. And because of this, because there's such an attention on the analysis of sentences, this is one of the main differences between veto and Arch, is Arch has painstakingly, over decades, compiled a library of individual sentences within novels, cultural criticism, philosophy, creative nonfiction. She's isolated those sentences as very distinct, relevant examples of how sentences work, how different portions of a sentence grammatically work, with an eye toward being able to, again, analyze those sentences for effect. Veto is a great book. I don't mean to suggest that it's lesser. It's just different. Veto has constructed sentences in order to illustrate certain grammatical techniques and terms. And Arch has plucked them out of real writing. So what does the Arch book cover? It's organized in 13 chapters, and that kind of just throughout the length of it, that builds the diagramming system from very, very basic sentences to much more complex sentences. So it's 13 chapters that just build in complexity. There are 6 interludes within those chapters as well that kind of cover issues and questions and complications along the way that don't quite fit into those main chapters. There are 4 appendices as well that then apply those grammar diagramming principles to issues of style and rhetoric and sentence variety and diversity, rhythm, revision, those kinds of things, getting students to practically implement the diagramming. There's also an instructor site with sample quizzes that instructors can use, as well as complete diagrams from the chapter exercises within the book. Selling points. We've talked a little bit about this already. Real sentences. I think that's going to appeal to a lot of people. These are like every single sentence example within the book has been plucked from actual published work. And those examples have, again, to get back to that rhetorical lens, they have actual purposes and meanings. They have been employed in certain ways to affect certain stylistic hopes. So students are analyzing something that a real writer wittingly chose to do, with the idea then that they will be better able to do the same thing in their own prose writing. So there again, the connection of the syntax to the rhetoric and style. Still, grammar is at the heart of this. The student is learning grammar, but there's the analytical portion that comes after that. As well, Arch has she calls it sophisticated, but she's just treating grammar in a way that allows for legitimate disagreement. Grammatical rules change, style changes, and any book on grammar has to allow for that kind of change. It has to illustrate and show that change. Specifically then, when it comes to the Arch versus Vito, in Vito, you are learned, and these are highly distilled. There's more than just this, but this is a good way of thinking about it in very bare terms. The Vito, you are learning diagramming through, or learning, sorry, grammar through diagramming. And in Arch, you're analyzing sentences through diagramming. Okay, that analysis being the key difference. Some additional bits. The Vito, I would suggest, is a little more introductory. Again, the constructed examples, and it's arguably a little bit more traditional in its approach to the English language. It's not strictly prescriptive. There is room for descriptive interpretations of grammar in there as well, but it is a little bit more traditional. Arch, slightly more advanced, authentic examples, real examples, and the attentions on syntax, style, and rhetoric. Keep in mind as well, and this is key, if we're able to distinguish these two books like this, we're hoping very much that we don't hive off adoptions of the Vito when we talk to people about the Arch. So if we really focus on how these books are different, our hope is that we add adoptions. We don't just kind of come out, one for one across the board. So keep in mind that you're not kind of pitting these books against each other, as the Arch is a replacement for the Vito. It supplements the Vito in a different way. It's not supplements, but it treats grammar in a different way, probably a little bit more of an advanced way, better for people who really want an analytical approach to the field. Where does it fit? Advanced grammar, traditional grammar, grammar for teachers. It's mainly a text for a second grammar class. But honestly, you can pitch it to any class, any course with grammar in the title, except this kind of goes back to the How to Read book. We're not looking at developmental language. Like, we're not looking at ESL classes. It's a stiff book. Students are doing a lot of work. But if there's grammar in the course title, away you go. It's never going to be a weird suggestion to a prof to talk about this book to them if they're teaching a grammar class. There are profs who will balk at sentence diagramming as the best pedagogical method to teach grammar. That's okay. Grammarians, like medievalists, are really, really highly finicky people, and they are going to have very set ideas about how one should teach grammar. If sentence diagramming is not it, that's fine. Move on. The end game for Arch is really to encourage students to become more conscious and deliberate about the choices they make in their own prose. Diagramming is her methodology for doing that. She's teaching grammar, she's teaching sentence diagramming. The aim is to have students become better prose stylists themselves. We're a little bit pushed for date, still hoping for an October print date, but Jennifer just some personal issues and has had to postpone work on just the final elements here, but we're still looking good for fall. And yeah, that's a rip through it. I don't want to spend loads and loads of time on this book because it is such a clearly, easily marketable book. Grammar in the class title, a prof teaching grammar. There's our new book. And we can talk about that. If you begin by saying, oh, do you do sentence diagramming or do you appreciate sentence diagramming as a pedagogical method? And they say, no, I don't like it, or yes, I do like it. There's your path.
Can you say something more, Brett, about the Reed Kellogg versus the sentence tree diagramming method or whatever? And should Reed Kellogg really be in the title foregrounded, or?
She really wanted it. We talked about this as a subtitle.
Okay.
She really wanted that in there. Very, like, it was kind of a I'm going to die on this hill kind of a thing. So I think, yeah, so we tried to do that for her.
I have no sense myself of how the traditional tree. I'm assuming that probably our Vitho Grammar by Diagram book uses more of the tree diagramming than the Reed Kellogg, or
No,
it's
it
Reed
does
Kellogg.
Reed Kellogg. It's
Reed Kellogg. Oh, okay. Sorry.
They're both Reed Kellogg. Yeah.
Okay.
And the background there, as much as I can say, this is not an area that I have a ton of academic background in, Don. But Reed Kellogg came about it, like I say, in the mid-19th century with this method for breaking down the diagram, the grammar elements of the grammatical elements of a sentence. It's more linear. So you begin with a sentence and you're underlining words and then kind of going down from there vertically. A tree, if you can think of it, it looks more to me like it looks more like an upside down tree, to be honest, with like the trunk at the beginning and then it branches down like this. It's, as far as I can tell, I don't want to state this outright, it's just a different visual representation of the grammatical elements in a sentence. That seems to me to be more or less accurate. Yeah, without getting into the basics.
And I had the same thought about, I think Brett did too, about the terminology, Don, but I do think anyone who's going to adopt a book with Reed Kellogg diagramming will be fine with the fact that it's called Reed Kellogg diagramming.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she did as well really want like style in that sentence, or in the subtitle as well, because that is really a key point of this.
Brett, can I ask real quick, just because this doesn't come up often, but it has come up more than once in in-person sales calls, where like a comp professor will say something like, I want a book that like teaches students how to use sentences well and like teach writing from a sentence level. And I think I asked you before in that context what to recommend, and you recommended templates, like the Models of Style and Usage for Writers book. Is this still the case where it's like if a professor, I know you're saying this is like a very strictly grammar courses, but if a comp professor says that, should like we consider any of these like Reed Kellogg books, or should we almost never recommend it for like a general comp course?
There is not a comp course that I have come across or an adoption that I've come across where the Vitho or the Arch book now would make a great fit for that. Even with that qualifier of a prof saying this is the kind of thing I want. These are really strictly grammar books. Like to the core. And they're not teaching the kinds of writing skills, I should say, sorry, that a typical comp professor would use.
Mhm.
Certainly, I would say, certainly not in like a Comp 1 class.
Yeah. Okay.
Just the likelihood of either of these books fitting there, very slim, very slim.
Okay. Okay. Good to know. Thank you.
For if that
Right.
does come up, like honestly, the better book to recommend would be one of the Broadview guides, I think, either the new handbook or the like last year's the Broadview guide to grammar, punctuation, and usage.
Okay.
But
Cool.
these
Brett,
those are more
is
more
there
reference. Sorry?
is there a substantial market among the other texts that you list as competing? My understanding is that the Vito is the market leader in sentence diagramming.
It is.
You described Understanding English Grammar, the Pearson book, having only one chapter on the topic.
Yeah.
Like, are we going to encounter courses where instructors aren't using the Vito, but are teaching sentence diagramming? And what would they be presently using that we're trying to switch them away from?
This is the thing. There's a conundrum here. We don't want to pull people away from the Vito, but there are not pure sentence diagramming books out there other than what we have. So we are going to have to tiptoe lightly here. We talked about this way back in the editorial board meeting when we decided to go ahead with the book and decided that the books had different enough lenses on diagramming that we could have room for both of them. And I think we can. It's just a matter of, pinpointing quickly the way that the prof is teaching grammar. Do they want students just understanding the principles of grammar? Do they want students understanding the principles of grammar as a means toward analyzing prose? A lot of the Vito books, as I understand, are adopted in grammar classes that like Grammar for Teachers. And my sense is that the Arch would probably not be as clean a fit for those classes, because that's really where, teachers are teaching students how to teach grammar, period. They're not going that extra step. And that's why I've suggested that the Arch as well is slightly more advanced, because you're learning that grammar, but then you're moving forward with it.
Thanks, Brett. And secondarily, of course, Grammar by Diagram has the workbook. I know you described there being a lot of exercises here. Do you think people are going to ask about that or worry about it? I don't really know what the process is for completion of exercises in this kind of course.
Yeah, there's a lot of diagrams within the book itself, and then there's the instructor site with the completed diagrams by way of answers. It's possible if there's a clamoring among profs that they would like a workbook that we could provide that down the road. There's no plan to do that right now, though, the way that we've had with the Vito. No.
Okay. So students would, just so I understand, and this may be rather naive, but they'd treat it like a logic text where you take a blank piece of paper, write it out.
Yes, sorry. I'm sorry. I understand what you're saying now. Yeah, that's exactly what you'd be doing there. Yeah.
Just another very quick note on market. Many people, I'm sure you've had this experience, Brett, have come up to me about Grammar by Diagram at conferences and said, "Oh, the nuns." And I think sentence diagramming, for whatever reason, has historically been associated with sort of traditional / conservative, small c conservative instruction, and often Catholic institutions. So that's just something to keep in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
I think the kind of reading, writing, and arithmetic classics kind of instruction is more likely to be interested in the Vito book. The Arch book, maybe a little less, but I think potentially both of these might be of more interest at that kind of institution.
Yeah, and that maps specifically onto that traditional grammar course title.
Yeah.
But that's a good point. Yeah. There is analyzing sentences. Let's move on to this lovely little book. Digital Writing, a second edition. This was a really, I think I can safely say it was kind of a surprising book for us. It really took off in a way that we did not imagine it would. It's really done quite well for us. It had the misfortune, through nobody's fault, of coming out basically right before AI jumped onto the scene. And naturally, any book on digital writing nowadays needs to talk about AI. And so that's the reason why we moved into a second edition rather quickly for this book. We wouldn't normally do that, but its datedness oddly became really apparent really quickly. So we've gone into a second edition, and the main changes are all related to AI. There are some, nods as well, just to other emerging writing technologies, of course, but AI is the key element there. So what is it? It's an introduction to writing effectively, and I'm going to stress this, and critically in digital environments. In digital environments, kind of what you might suspect: web pages, social media, video, graphic design, the kinds of writing that you do in digital writing jobs across the board, and then in AI as well. An interesting element of this book, though, is that it's not just building on the practical skills that students need for these kinds of projects, tasks. It draws quite heavily on rhetorical theory, on digital media theory, and the philosophy of technology. But it does so in a very weirdly light way. It's not heavily ensconced in theory. It really is a very highly practical book. The professional context is kind of emphasized throughout. So there's an underlying focus on giving students the skills that they need for future digital writing careers. It's really pointed in that direction. There's a whole chapter just on digital writing jobs that kind of covers resumes, creating a resume for a digital writing job, creating cover letters, those kinds of things. But then as well, there is this theoretical context that rides throughout. It couches all of those, that practical instruction, I should say, within the larger framework of how rhetoric, media, and technology work and how they work upon us. To kind of, spell it out with a few examples, the professional, the left side of this column, students are learning how specifically to write for a web audience on a web platform, but then how those different platforms shape audiences. Things like improving findability for the website that you're writing in, which is a very different endeavor nowadays with AI that's just kind of pulling information from sites rather than, directing you to specific pages. But then how algorithms rank information and how that algorithm sort of prioritizes certain results for you, and doesn't give you, necessarily the perfect picture of what's out there on the web. It's just reading an algorithm and presenting you information based on how many people have visited this thing before. The professional, the business context, writing social media context specifically, but then how, say, platforms use data, and what we need to think about in that context. How we work with visual media, but how design then affects persuasion. How we use specific digital tools like Adobe or what have you, ChatGPT, but then their ethical implications. And then again, working with AI, but then as well, what should remain human-centered. And I'll make mention, I think I mentioned this later on in the slideshow here, but a really key component of this book, it was quite funny. The additional chapter on AI was so scathingly anti-AI that we really had to dial it back, just so that it also kind of, employed some actual helpful instruction on what students might use AI for when they do digital writing. But the AI inclusion in the book is, you cannot read it any other way. It's Lawrence makes a really very passionate case for keeping all writing human voiced. So what does the book cover? There's 6 chapters. Introduction to writing, digital writing generally. Looks at then social media, looks at writing for the web, web pages, blogs, that kind of a thing. Looks at digital visual design, like the design elements that you're going to employ when you do this writing. Looks at jobs and careers, and then that last brand new chapter of AI. Why a second edition? We covered this a little bit. It's updated and revised to reflect emerging technology, the artificial intelligence, which was just key. So there's a brand new chapter there, and there's AI exercises that have been added to every single chapter as well that applies to the content that's just been covered. And then there are generally just new end of chapter exercises and discussion questions, and lots of them. It's very highly practical in this regard, gets students writing constantly. Excellent sources of assignments, exercises. Where does it fit? Again, this is kind of a relatively easily identifiable market, not quite so easily identifiable as the grammar text we just talked about, but undergraduate courses that are specifically concerned with digital writing or writing for digital media. Those courses are easy to find. Digital writing, digital communication, writing in digital environments. This is a book suited perfectly to those classes. Some other course titles to look out for, though: social media writing, digital rhetoric, business writing courses. Because there's such a focus on career in this book, I can well imagine business writing classes using this as a supplemental book, or as a book where they're doing some other textbook things and digital writing isn't quite so completely covered. Writing for marketing, these kinds of classes. As well, then professional and technical writing that has a significant digital component. The latter one there is not going to be quite so apparent when you're searching course schedules. That's more a conversation or an email exchange potentially. But I do think it behooves us to maybe mention this in a postscript when we're writing to people about the Concise Guide to Technical Communication or the McRae book, Business and Professional Writing. Nice little postscript there that you can add. It can be used as the primary text in a focused course, or as I say, then incorporated into a broader one. What do individual chapters feel like in the book? They are, he just speeds through concepts. It's really direct, brief, constantly questioning, and conversational. And I've just pulled quickly one little quote from the book in the AI chapter. It's like, all right, so humans created computer programs that can assemble text and images in statistically likely patterns based on large amounts of human writing and art as their training data. When you put it like that, it doesn't sound so bad. What's the big deal? Well, gather around the fire, my friends, and let me tell you something about technology. It doesn't always work out the way we think it's going to. In his famous essay, The Question Concerning Technology, philosopher Martin Heidegger warned about the non-instrumental effects of technology. In other words, technologies can have effects on us that are not directly related to their stated purpose. I chose this one just because I think it's a really, really good microcosm of what he does throughout the chapters. Very conversational. Well, gather around the fire, my friends. But he's working in some fairly heavy philosophical concepts throughout the book. But he touches on them quickly, moves through them quickly. Like writing in Facebook is like a couple of pages and then on. And that's the case throughout the book. Rhetorically driven throughout as well. He hammers home the purpose and the audience for a given digital writing task. When you think about purpose, you're going to be thinking about things like genre, in how a social media post on X is decidedly different for both audience and purpose than an entire blog post. So that couches the instruction that follows. He's looking at the rhetorical purpose of a given form of writing and moving on from there. A great number of contemporary real world scenarios, couched in a lot of pragmatic, recognizable kinds of digital writing examples. In the AI one, for instance, there's a still of, I don't know if you remember the on Truth Social, well, no, it was on X, I think, that Trump posted that deepfake video of Obama being arrested in the White House. And he didn't create it, but he reposted it. And so there's these elements of immediately recognizable elements from the real world that he uses as examples and then kind of breaks down in terms of the rhetorical push of those and what we ought or ought not to be doing when we create our own. Short explanations of concepts I mentioned. He's dipping a toe in and then he's taking it out and he's moving it on. A lot of in-chapter prompts and exercises, wonderful discussion questions, exercises, AI exercises in particular as its own category in the chapter end exercises. And yeah, this is eComp's available now. The book will be out later this month. Short little book. Oh, well, yeah, one thing I did want to mention too is we went with color for this edition as opposed to the earlier edition, which was black and white. We got a good deal on the printing costs, and I think it really does pump up the book quite a bit. It does look quite nice. Quite happy with the result. One quick correction to the NBI on the instructor site is that we changed a little bit of that. We have some exercise, or we have some chapter quizzes, sample syllabus, sample assignments, and an exam, discussion board prompts, and then some resources that students and instructors can go to for digital writing certification. That's that.
Brett, you describe a large range of potential audiences, and I'm especially curious when it comes to something like business, actual business programs where we have a marketing course or that kind of thing, where I could imagine this book being useful. Do we have a sense of the breakdown of types of courses for first edition sales? Was it almost all in English studies comp courses? Was a lot of it in service courses or business courses?
Most of it was, I think, business writing classes within English departments, like the comp classes that you would encounter in an English department teaching business writing. But there were a lot of courses, like one of the main adopters, the most regular adopters, was a writing for marketing class. Now, again, that writing for marketing that was offered within an English department. It's probably cross-listed. I'm not sure if it was cross-listed, probably cross-listed, but I don't know for sure about that. But the prof, anyway, was in the English department. So I do think that this is primarily still going to be English because the focus is so heavily skewed toward writing. And that's where most of the relevant classes are going to fall. The business classes, even though they're touching on marketing, communication, that kind of a thing, so much more generally is offered or is necessary to cover in those syllabi than just writing. This could still work, but like it's a writing book, and as far as I can guess anyway, in a really hardcore business kind of context, Lawrence's focus on rhetorical theory, digital media theory, philosophy of technology, those kinds of things may not quite be as great a concern to cover.
That's helpful. Thanks.
Brent, as a follow-up to that, just the writing focus, could you say a little bit about the digital visual design chapter and that it talks about things like Adobe and video stuff, like how much in that is sort of hands-on instruction in, oh, here's some, little basics of digital design, things you could try in Adobe versus, kind of very overview, hands-off general
It, it's
advice.
it, it's much more general. It's much more. He touches more on rhetorical principles of design, the kinds of things that you ought to consider when you're introducing visuals into a blog or whatever else. It's not so much platform. Like here are the ins and outs of using Adobe. Here are the ins and outs of InDesign, of whatever else. It's less that, and that was very purposeful, so that clearly those programs are updating so frequently that it's advisable, I think, not to get into the nitty-gritty there. He does talk about kind of different, like Canva. He talks about these kinds of things, but it's not getting deep down into specifics of how to use each individual program or platform.
Cool. Is there in the artificial intelligence stuff, is there anything about like generating images with AI or anything like that?
Yeah,
Okay,
he does talk about that. But if you get the book, open it up to the AI chapter. I mean, it's unequivocal. Anyone picking up this book that wants desperately to teach their students how to use AI in this context, this book will not be their friend. This is not one that they're going to want to use.
Gotcha.
He's let the human do the work. There's reasons for that. AI can do some of these things over here, but you do the work.
Cool. Thanks.
Is that it?
Sounds good to me. Should we talk about some VEs now?
Let's do it. Great presentations, Brett. The PowerPoints were really helpful.
Oh, good. Good.
Yes, I'm excited about all these, so I'll try to still power through quickly and not get bogged down. Just a real general note, when we bring BEs to the editorial board, it's a different kind of discussion now, because we kind of know that especially non-canonical works are almost, they're almost 100% likely to sell in small numbers to very small numbers. So we look for other reasons to sign books. And some of those reasons include, broadening parts of our list that have been narrow, bringing different kinds of diversity to the list. And I think some of the books I have this season, all of them in different ways, support that goal. So I'll start with The Horrors of Slavery and the Axe Laid to the Root by Robert Wedderburn. The Horrors of Slavery is a short memoir by Wedderburn, and Axe Laid to the Root is a short-lived periodical that he published in London. So it's a series of 6 very short issues. So 2 different genres brought together in the same volume.
Marjorie, I'm so sorry. I think your sound is cutting out. Is anybody else experiencing that? Yeah.
I can't hear anything.
You can't hear anything?
Oh,
Oh, now it's coming back.
now it's back.
Give me a sec. I'm getting a message that says my internet connection is unstable. Let me just pop out and pop back in. Sorry about that.
I can't hear a thing.
You couldn't hear the last bit either, Britt? No? Oh.
Can someone else say something just so that I know that I can hear somebody?
Words.
We're
I
talking
cannot
in
hear you,
both.
Tarini.
What?
And
What about
people
me?
can obviously hear me.
Hello?
Oh, hello?
Brett, anything? No?
Maybe it's a
Wait, what? Hello?
yeah,
You can
Dylan,
hear
I
me?
I can hear you,
I think
Dylan.
I might, I'm gonna
Yeah,
sign out
this is
and sign back in
yeah,
too.
this is a Brett
Yeah.
thing too.
Yeah, I could hear everyone but Marjorie, so
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. Strange. I wonder what the AI summary is going to say about this part. Staff yelled at each other for 10 minutes.
I think I got it now.
Okay, can people hear me? Maybe other than Brett,
Yes.
other people can hear me? Okay, did people
Yes.
get any of that or nothing? Or my lips moving?
I got to the 6 short issues of the
Yeah.
periodic.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. I'm on my phone data now, so I'm hoping that it's a Wi-Fi issue and that will solve it. Okay, Wedderburn. Wedderburn was a London writer, itinerant preacher, publisher, pornographer, and he was born in Jamaica. His mother was enslaved, and his father owned his mother. Uh, Later, he moved to England. Initially, when he was born, his father did not have very much money, and he later inherited and became quite wealthy and returned to England. And Wedderburn had a lengthy dispute with him and his brother about his parentage and his father's treatment of his mother, which is part of what arises in both of the works included here, The Horrors of Slavery and The Axe Laid to the Root. Both of these are uncompromising, blistering condemnations of the system of enslavement in Jamaica. The axe laid to the root is a biblical reference from the Bible saying that, you know, the tree will be knocked down and all the fruit of it will be destroyed. And Wedderburn is talking about what he hopes will be an eventual rebellion in Jamaica, where the enslaved people will arise and kill all of their enslavers. He was imprisoned repeatedly for various offenses, including blasphemy. And what he said that was blasphemous was that Christ was a radical reformer. So he was really part of a larger radical movement in England at the time, but also a really unique, uncompromising voice with a really unique perspective. I think scholarly interest in Wedderburn is increasing. People are probably more aware of him than he was, and he's an extremely important and interesting figure from this period. As far as course instruction, I would think that any Brit-Lit course or transatlantic course, possibly even in history, that focuses on the history of slavery in the Caribbean, the history of slavery in England, race during the period, radical traditions, print culture. There are a lot of ways this could go. That said, I think for the most part, it will be pretty small and specialized courses. So I would not comp this with Wild Abandon, despite potential avenues of interest. I would really encourage e-comps where possible, because I think some people will want to get their hands on this. There is one competitor. It is a quite elderly University Press edition. So there is one out there, but it's not particularly up to date and doesn't have BE style apparatus. Yeah, I'm proud of this one. Any questions? Okay, The Marrow of Tradition by Charles Chesnutt is another literary work that's related to race relations and racial injustice. Chesnutt wrote this novel in response to the Wilmington Massacre, which was a white supremacist attack on Black people that was very historically important. And he wanted to represent it in a fictionalized form in this novel. The appendices include quite a lot of reviews and may sort of seem excessive at a glance, but the responses to the work are really interesting and illuminating of the context. The difference between white reviewers and Black reviewers in response to this work is really interesting. William Dean Howells, white critic, said, you know, was a great appreciator of Chesnutt and said, well, this novel would be better if it was not so bitter. Whereas African American responses to it were very different and did not feel that you know, writing about a white supremacist massacre was necessarily bitter. So those reviews and responses and the historical context provided in the appendices is interesting and revealing here. The introduction, I think, as with some introductions to works edited by Caritha Mitchell, another BE editor, alludes to present events and present history. In this case, I think it does it in quite a subtle manner, saying you can see some parallels in discourse about racial justice from this period and our own time without being obnoxiously present focused or too heavy-handed politically. But it is a way, I think, to make this work interesting and engaging to students. It is quite a readable, easy to read, drama-packed novel. It is of its time, including very heavy use of what reads to us now, I think, is sort of stereotypical African American dialect, but of course, Chestnut was himself African American. But yeah, still, I think a canonical, well-known work. It's not in any way obscure. It is in a sort of in-between category market-wise where it's taught, but not taught a huge amount the way some very canonical works of American literature are. But anyone teaching American lit, especially African American lit, will know this work. There are a number of competitors. The Bedford edition is pretty broad viewy, to be honest. It has quite a bit of cultural material. It is now 25 years old, so it's quite dated. The Norton is almost 600 pages long, so it also has a lot of material, but so much material that many courses, I think, couldn't handle it. And then there's just a pretty bare bones and inexpensive Penguin and Dover edition. Yeah. Any questions on the Mirror of Tradition? Okay. A Son of the Forest by William Apess is the next one. This book is now published and in the warehouse, so there will not be any delays on it. Apess was an itinerant preacher and writer. He was of Pequot indigenous descent, white descent, and also African American descent. His mother had been enslaved. This work is really interesting on a lot of levels. Drew Lopenzina talks in the introduction about stereotypes of indigenous people at the time, which I think to a large extent still hold now, associating them with the wilderness and with nature and the kind of noble savage stereotype. And Apess talks about a life, the title is A Son of the Forest, but in reality, a lot of his life, he was an indentured servant. He served in the military. He worked very hard in the context of economic constraints on indigenous people and Black people at the time to make a life for himself, for his family. He struggled with alcoholism, and a lot of his life was urban or small town life, not a stereotypical image of an indigenous person in the early 19th century. The work is autobiographical, but also talks a lot about the situation of indigenous people at the time and is very direct about the impact of colonialism, talking about alcoholism and abuse in his own family and being very clear about what he believes the genesis of that was, and very clear about the ways he feels that his people have been dehumanized. Interesting connections also with abolitionist culture and African American racial justice advocacy at the time. Apess was very involved with that community and preached in Black churches. So it's another interesting, the kind of connection to Black and white racial justice activists at the time in Apess's life is quite interesting. Drew Lopenzina, the editor, is a contributing editor to Ball and a respected scholar of early Native American literature, really an expert on Apess, probably the best known writer and scholar on him. But all the material in the edition is very straightforward and student friendly. This is not a scholarly project at all. I think it's very readable and useful. As far as the market, there isn't a massive amount to choose from for instructors wanting to represent Indigenous authors from this period. There just aren't a huge wealth of published works to choose from, and this is a really interesting and readable one. So I don't think it's going to be a huge blockbuster, but I think there definitely will be interest in it from people teaching American literature, Native American literature, and potentially American history. I think I'm often skeptical of that crossover, but in this case, I think there is a real possibility there. The framing of the edition is not particularly literary, it is heavily historical and cultural.
Marjorie, in the market list, you have the US in parentheses for all of the generalized courses. There are, of course, more per capita Indigenous literature courses in Canada. Is this worth mentioning in those contexts, even though it's an American,
That is
more
an
American history?
interesting question. My initial thought is that in most cases, probably not. My sense is that Canadian Indigenous lit and Indigenous history courses really do prefer to focus on Canadian content. Might be case to case, but I suspect you wouldn't get a lot of traction there. Kind of unfortunately, I think that's true in both directions. Americans tend to focus strongly on Native American versus Indigenous Canadian material in courses. And as far as I know, APES didn't have a lot of Canadian connections, like it would be a stretch. Any other questions? Okay, last is The Blood of the Vampire. Great title, extremely weird book. This book is about a vampire who is a woman, is of mixed race background, and does not drink blood. She she's a very strange character. I would say not sympathetic. Though she is has Black heritage. She is very anti-Black. She has a kind of childlike callousness and cruelty, and she drains people's energy, life force, rather than their blood. So it's a really interesting premise, and a really strange premise, kind of a strange, dark book. So I think the premise is immediately intriguing, and the book is readable and interesting. It is it is odd. Like it is really a strange work, and a kind of unique. I'm kind of surprised that it is or isn't better known, given how interesting the premise is. I will say that unfortunately, probably because it is such an intriguing premise and title and work, there is a Penguin Classics coming out, I think probably on the same day roughly that our book is projected to come out, which is a real bummer. There hadn't really been any competitors prior to this. The paperback is $32. So I think we will have an easy in to say that our book has advantages because it has a lot of apparatus and it is much less expensive. But yeah, kind of an unfortunate coincidence there. I think this obviously would be of interest for horror courses, gothic courses, vampire lit courses, monsters, anything to do with the supernatural, especially if the course has a component talking about race, gender, all these things are, I think this novel is potentially rich ground for analysis there, and quite teachable.
Marjorie, very annoying about the penguin, though it has a terrible cover, so maybe that'll undermine it.
It's very tradey and cheesy, yeah.
I was just reading the marketing copy from the Penguin. Just curious about that because theirs heavily emphasizes the bisexuality and gender-related aspects of the novel. Are those apparent, or is that more penguin marketing?
I think bisexual is a stretch. I think you could read that into the sort of subtext, but I think it's pretty marketing copy-y. Let me take a look at it again.
So, like gender in the 19th century, this probably is not.
Oh, no, sorry. No, I do think gender as depicted is actually really interesting. And I don't think a course, that had supernatural elements, horror elements, and was also interested in gender. I don't know that a course primarily focused on gender, that this would be at the top of the list. But gender is definitely an interesting thematic component. Biracial, bisexual, feminist, psychic vampire. Yeah, I would I would not go with bisexual or feminist, frankly. Though I could see an argument for both. Yeah, I think they're really pushing this to a modern audience and flattening the nuances of what's going on, I think.
Okay. Just thinking about courses,
Yeah.
course titles and matching, but it sounds like probably
Yeah.
Penguin is looking for trade audiences.
I think I mean, they probably will get adopted in some courses, though that price is daunting. But it seems like they're really pushing the sort of contemporary interest. And yeah, biracial psychic vampire is definitely correct. Yeah.
Marjorie, do a lot of like Gothic and Victorian scholars like know of this book well, or is it like a so underground kind of book that no one would be like, "Oh my God, you have Blood of the
I
Vampire."
think it's in between. I think it's not like, I don't know, like a Sunless Heart or something. There's things that Broadview's published where literally no one knows that this book exists.
Yeah,
And then there's things like, I don't know, The Beetle, which would be,
yeah.
I think, even when we published it, would be quite familiar to a lot of people in the area.
hmm
I think this would be not capital O obscure, but someone with a kind of superficial interest in this field might not know it.
hmm Okay.
Yeah, on the obscure side, but not super, super obscure. I mean, the fact that Penguin
hmm
Classics is, kind of an imprint of canonical status to some extent. Penguin
hmm
also cycles things in and out, so if this doesn't sell well, they might just put it out of print right away. But that
Yeah,
makes me think that it is moved from, when we first started thinking about signing it, it was pretty obscure to being less so now.
right. Okay. Cool.
It's interesting. Rachel Stewart is just a PhD candidate. I was just looking her up.
Oh, that is
Um,
interesting.
yeah, at Ohio State.
Hmm. I wonder if she approved the copy.
Oh, yes. One more question for you, Marjorie.
Yeah.
And so sorry if I'm ignorant here, but what is Obeah and its relation to the book?
Yeah, so Harriet, the vampire of the title, has heritage from the Caribbean. And my understanding, I don't know a lot about this, is that Obeah is basically a religious slash magical supernatural system that is real, that has a long tradition in the Caribbean, and that the implication in the novel is that Harriet's curse, Harriet's power come from her heritage and to some extent from that kind of Obeah tradition.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. And the appendix on food, Harriet is not depicted as being fat in the novel, but she is strangely hungry all the time, which kind of ties into other aspects of her personality.
Marjorie, can you say a little bit more about the images that are included in the feed? I'm surprised that there are so many.
Yeah, so there are some images of the book when Harriet initially meets the other woman characters that end up featuring in the novel. They are at a Belgian seaside resort. So there are some images relating to kind of travel and tourism at the time, especially within Europe. There's also a scene where they go to an art gallery in Belgium and view these kind of, I don't know how to describe them. They're very kind of dramatic, capital R, romantic, sort of scary paintings. And so those are also provided in the appendix and really kind of fit well with the mood of the book. Yeah. So those are some of the examples of the images that are provided. I might be forgetting something. I think those are the main ones.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, over to spring preview.
Yeah.
Let's do that. Marjorie, do you want to start? Or Brett, did you want to start? I don't know.
It doesn't matter to me at all.
I can start if I have actually very little to say. I think the
Same.
spring books are ones that will require a lot more nuance when I actually talk about them. But briefly, there is a book called Craft, which is a guide to writing fiction. That is written by Deborah Willis, who some of you will remember as Freehand Acquisitions editor and a well-known Calgary fiction writer, Marina Endicott, also a Freehand author, and Jacqueline Baker at the U of A. As submitted, it is very short, so that might be something I need to negotiate a bit with the authors. But yes, a very brief guide to fiction writing. Strangely, also a book on reading fiction, and that's by Patricia Comatini. And it's very different from How to Read. It's much of more of a sort of reflective book on her experiences with her students' challenges reading fiction. And it's sort of framed around the difficulties that modern students and modern readers in general have approaching fiction, and provides suggestions and exercises and examples to try to get students more engaged and to think about fiction as a important part of their lives. But I'll talk about that in more detail in the spring. I don't think either of these are ones that reps really need to have in their minds when they're talking to people in advance.
And honestly, I have a couple of books that are in a very similar vein in terms of keeping them in your mind for active marketing. But I've talked before about Right to Engage, which is the Canadian academic writing book. Just kind of has gone through a number of delays that were not obviously anticipated, and it's just been kind of pushed back and pushed back. Will be coming out though for early 2027 for marketing in the context of, well, possibly summer, but fall 2027 classes. I don't know that there's a ton to get into in terms of description of that book, but it is going to be a rhetoric and reader, and it is going to be distinctly Canadian. Wouldn't be the kind of book that we'd be marketing to the US. So that will be coming. And then as well in the spring, something that I'm kind of excited about, to be honest, but is not going to be like it's not going to beat down the door revenue wise, but it's I think going to improve our position, I think, among comp scholars. And that is a book for grad students, adjuncts, graduate programs that teach how to that prepare grad students to teach the comp courses. So it's called Becoming a Writing Professor. So it looks at the kinds of things that a grad student needs to know when they're planning out or before they're planning out their first teaching foray into Comp 101. That's also coming out. That's it. Either of those two books, you like, if the conversation is ongoing, if you're talking to people about, for sure bring it up. But we're not in a position where we're going to be sending comps anytime soon. So don't talk about it in that context. That's it.
I've got one that is a little more of a big deal. The Broadway Anthology of American Literature Volume 2 will be coming out in spring 2027. Yay, for real. We will present the book properly for the spring sales season, but Christina Dave suggested that I should offer a few talking points now, since promoting this book will be such a big job, and you may be visiting schools this season that you won't be visiting in the winter. Yeah. We will be making a product page for the Broadview site with a nearly final TOC that should be available soon, so that you will have somewhere to direct potential adopters to if you encounter people in the fall. Macroscopically, the key selling features are pretty similar to those of the first half, but I will outline a few things now. I don't intend to take more than a couple of minutes. I'll mostly frame things in comparison to the Norton, since that is our biggest competitor by far. First, size. The Concise ball is bigger than the Norton Shorter and smaller than the Norton Full. So it may be a better fit for instructors who want more flexibility than they can get from the Shorter, but don't want to make their students buy the full enormous 3-volume Norton package. The online component, of course, increases flexibility quite a lot further for instructors who are willing to use online material. A few authors who aren't in the Norton Shorter that might be of interest to adopters are Jose Marti, Black Elk, Tennessee Williams, Malcolm X, Thomas Pynchon, Joan Didion, Tim O'Brien, Percival Everett, Jessamine Ward, and Ta-Nehisi Coates. And there are plenty more. Those are just some highlights that have the potential to grab a potential adopter. As some of the patterns in those names might suggest to you, representation is also a key feature where the Broadview is, I think, very competitive with the Norton. Compared to the second half of the Norton, the Broadview has author sections for more Indigenous authors, more Asian American authors, more Hispanic authors, and more trans authors. That last would not be difficult since the Norton has 0. Obviously, representation is a fraught issue in American universities right now, so use your judgment about when and how to raise that in the contemporary context. But we do still think it will be a selling feature for some potential adopters, even if they're also concerned about how their students might receive it. Context. The Broadview has a lot of features intended to help students appreciate literature in its cultural, political, and social context. Author introductions pay attention to lines of literary influence and reception history, what we've been calling in-house the biography of the text, as much as the author's personal biography. Period introductions discuss important historical developments as well as major genres. And we have a lot of wonderful visual materials and other contextual materials throughout, including relevant music and film selections in the online component. Speaking of context, we have a lot of omnibus sections, and these offer more context on particular themes, but they also include works of literature that can be taught on their own, and are a way that we've been able to incorporate a much wider range of authors and kinds of text than the Norton can with their much less substantial omnibus sections. There are a lot of them, too many to outline, but I'll give a few examples to give you an idea. We have the Gilded Age and the Progressive Era, Gender and Sexuality, the Harlem Renaissance, Modernism, sections for World Wars I and II, Nature and the Environment, and Suburbs, Small Towns, the Open Road. We also have a massive omnibus section on American poetry from the mid-century to the present, which allows us to include way, way more recent poets than the Norton can in individual author sections. Another point you might get asked about is price. I don't think the prices are set in stone yet. Someone correct me if that's not the case. But they will probably be comparable to the Norton. Right now, the Concise 1 print book is about $5 cheaper than the Norton, and permanent access to the ebook is about $4 more than a Norton ebook rental. So in a similar ballpark. The other key competitor we can't compete with on price is, of course, open educational resources. We can, I think, definitely compete on quality, although I know the chances of persuading an academic of that may be slim. So I think we're probably going to have better luck approaching Norton users, people who are interested in anthologies whose quality you have to pay for. Those are the key components, and obviously I'll get into a lot more detail when we present this properly in the spring. But does anyone have anything to add? Any thoughts or questions? All right.
We will get a simple web listing up soon with the current TOC, which is very close to being final, so that reps have something to refer to or send people to, but it won't be the full marketing package yet.
For reps who are going to be on the road, I'll just note that since we're not going to be visiting a lot of the same places in consecutive semesters, it is still really worthwhile to get out and chat with folks about these books, this book in particular, rather. So yeah, definitely follow along and look for that TOC, and don't be afraid to take time to talk about this incredibly important book for us when you're on the road.
Yeah, any other last notes from anybody regarding any of the English or composition titles that we looked at today? Okie dokie. Okay. I'm gonna wrap it up. There's gonna be a recording of this if you missed anything or want to review. But yeah, I'll see you guys back for the philosophy and other. Take care.
Cool.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks everybody. Bye bye.